This session, I've taken a look at different scales of management of public spaces. Specifically, I've learned about some of the hurdles facing the National Park Service in the U.S., as well as the issues surrounding the right to roam in Norway, and returning to the commons right here in my own backyard in the Santa Monica Mountains.
I manage a small community center that may be the last of its kind. It's not part of a public network of parks, but managed privately and open to the public. This has presented so many hurdles and risks that I wanted to look into this model and see if it's sustainable. Learn more about something called the tragedy of commons, and a phrase and concept that was introduced by economist Garrett Hardin in 1968.
The idea of the commons is that one resource is owned by everyone, or no one. All have access to the land. It's a public resource available for individual gain. Think of a beach or your neighborhood park or trailhead as local commons. Hardin described it as a pasture, and I have a cow and you have a cow, and then we both see how much land there is, so we both get more cows, and then eventually the land is destroyed. When people access the land for their own gain, they don't necessarily think about the long-term effects of their actions, and ultimately the resource suffers.
I started by looking at how the commons worked in medieval Europe, where this concept was used as a land management system until the Industrial Revolution, and many of these spaces were privatized, a practice called enclosure. Today, we see this privatization at work throughout the United States. A lot of pasture and open land is marked by barbed wire to keep people out and keep livestock in. The landscape is often dotted with no trespassing signs or other prevention measures. In contrast, some other nations have quite an opposite approach to outdoor access. Called the right to roam, this concept is practiced in a handful of countries and popular in Scandinavia. Allemannsretten, or every man's right, was codified in Norway in the Outdoor Recreation Act of 1957. The act ensures that everyone has a right to experience nature, even on private land. While popular, Allemannsretten is now under scrutiny.
What I found was that Norway's infrastructure is not built to sustain the growing impact of its tourism industry. For example, Norwegian tourism tracked visitation in a popular hiking trail which saw 500 people annually, and is now enduring foot traffic of 1,700 in a single day. A once majestic area in the Lofoten Islands has been called the Forest of Shit by locals because the amount of human waste left there by many tourists in the summer months.
The U.S. has no equivalent to the right to roam, but the nation's national parks present the same challenges to infrastructure, policy, and risks to visitors.
Hardin saw the tragedy playing out in the national parks in 1968. What he witnessed was a precursor to the overuse seen today. Take, for example, Yosemite National Park. Day access to Yosemite is not strictly regulated. This row of cars was backed up for hours in late November, and the John Muir Trail in the summer has been compared to a highway.
We Americans seem to have a knack for bringing lawsuits wherever we can. But we have something in the U.S. called the Doctrine of Federal Sovereign Immunity, which protects the National Park Service from being sued. So what does it say? And how far do those protections go? I found a few cases of interest.
Most park deaths are due to drowning or motor vehicle incidents. In 2010, a man was killed by a mountain goat in Olympic National Park. His widow filed suit against the government, claiming the national park officials were negligent in management of the goat. Because of sovereign immunity, the suit was mostly dismissed. One alternative to the commons has been to privatize portions of the parks, or parks entirely. But privatizing creates additional challenges. The Trump administration proposed privatizing national park campgrounds in 2019. This was met with fierce opposition and soon dropped. On a much smaller scale, located in the Santa Monica Mountains in Southern California, lies the privately managed but publicly accessible Topanga Community Center. This is an example of the commons that shows both the benefits and drawbacks of privatization. Local stakeholders typically do not understand the complex issues and risks surrounding the management of the property that does not benefit from sovereign immunity. A very small group of volunteers are the ones left with the hefty burden of responsibility. Within the modern anthropocentric frame, the existence of a commons has become more social and commercialized than physical and agrarian. The land claims made during American westward expansion were for individual gain, but the nation embraced the idea of a shared common land for all to enjoy, and the parks were born. Norway and the U.S. share an ideal concept to provide access to natural splendor for all. The strain of popularity and use is causing several management problems and questions surrounding sustainability and risk. In the U.S., ongoing issues surrounding common property risks sometimes detract from the experience of being in these places. This is visible on both national and local scales. There's no single solution to these woes. Building alliances and looking at long-term goals is a good place to start. Creating a welcoming park atmosphere can still occur if public entities work on building healthy and balanced partnerships with the public and with private companies, so that all stakeholders have a voice and these majestic places can be sustained for generations.